Welcome to the weekly Chalk Talks by the Tisch Institute for Global Sport. Every week, one of our faculty bring luminaries from the world of sport and sports business to you like this, wherever you are, so you can meet them and you can hear them and you can directly ask them for yourself. Doesn't matter what course you're taking right now. Every week, Tisch Institute for Global Sport at NYU does Chalk Talks. And I am David Hollander. I am the assistant dean in a program called Real World, but right now I am a clinical associate professor for the Tisch Institute for Global Sport. I teach sports management. And if you're an undergrad, I may be torturing you right now this semester in Introduction to Sports Management. I want to tell you who we have today. And then we're going to get right into it. This time is of the essence. I was introduced to Steve Miller by a mutual friend, and he said, you're going to have to meet Steve Miller, who he calls the most interesting man in the world. And I said, well, I really do want to meet the most interesting man in the world. Of course, I laughed a little bit. What, really? And I met Steve Miller. And in one phone call, I couldn't get enough. I couldn't hear enough. It just kept coming. I just had to say a name. I just had to say an and or a but or a preposition, and a story in the center of really moments of sports business and sports of such consequence. There he was with them all. So I know you may have read his bio. He has so many stories. This may be the last time I get to speak on the Zoom, but I'm going to introduce him with honor. Steve Miller's the CEO currently of Agassi Graf Holdings. I mean, there's four things. There's three for-profit entities: Agassi Graf Holdings, Agassi Ventures, Stephanie Graf Ventures, plus a not-for-profit foundation, the Andre Agassi Foundation for Education. He was at Nike for 10 years, where he only held the most important leadership positions: the director of global marketing, director of US marketing, director of NCAA marketing. And he managed just a little pot of $100 million for their investment in the 2000 Sydney Olympics. He's done so many other things. He managed to sneak in, by the way, the total resuscitation of the Professional Bowlers Association, where they had the highest membership rates of all time, and got them on ESPN. He brought bowling back. He began, and this isn't really the beginning because his beginnings go before the beginnings. He began as the director of athletics at Kansas State. When he arrived, Kansas State was not a powerhouse, but he made them a powerhouse. 11 straight bowl appearances, top 5 nationally ranked team. He led other leaders and showed them how to lead. Because before that, he did it himself on the field. He was coach of the year 5 times, member of 5 halls of fame, and is the chairman of the board of directors of USA Track and Field. This is the short version of his biography, professional biography, but I'm pleased to welcome with that my new friend, Steve Miller.
Thank you, David. I couldn't really appreciate it, and I appreciate the fact that you'd asked me to come on, and it's always an honor. I mean, it's always a pleasure. And at 78 years old, my numbers of requests are dwindling dramatically, and so this is a highlight for me. It's a highlight for me, and I'm happy to share not only the stories that I think are significant to the past, but what's going on now, and a bit of what I think is going to happen moving forward. And I'd encourage anyone to ask any questions that you want. One thing I've found out over the years, one very important lesson is I have no ability to lie. And that's because I can't remember what I said. So as a result, I have to stay in the truth. I can't back up a lie with a lie. So that's it. You get what you see, and that's where it is.
Well, good. Your criminal mind is now like turned off. So we'll get the unvarnished truth. Yeah, I just have a few questions for you.
Sure.
You can use them as jumping off points to talk about whatever you want to talk about. But what I found really interesting is how authentic you are. You started on the field, and I would just like to know, as you've gone to all the places you've gone, how important is it that you've actually touched the thing, that you've actually done the thing, sports?
Yeah, I think it is important. I think that without getting too long-winded about the very first question, great athletes generally don't make great coaches because great athletes, genetically, emotionally, they can do things that a lot of people can't do, and as a result, the best coaches and the best people who had a history were budding or aspiring coaches or aspiring athletes, people who wanted to be great, people who really wished in their heart of hearts could have been better than they were. And as a result, they transmit that desire to their charges, to the people they work with. But do I think it's important? I think it's critically important. It's like anything else. I remember when I was a young kid, we had a drug counselor come in and speak to our high school. And he was talking about, drugs and different things and what happens and, most of the negative things. And I asked the question, were you a drug addict? Did you take drugs? And he said no. And when he said no, it depreciated the value of what I was listening to, because I didn't feel that he had a grasp of what that emotion and feeling was. And although my athletic career was, relatively short, relatively exciting, I think having had those experiences, being in the locker rooms, talking to owners of teams, seeing constituents and consumers and customers, seeing other players and interacting with them, gave me a perspective that I would not have gotten by reading about it and or being peripheral to it. So I think it's important. It's important that if a friend of mine is going to give me advice on how to raise a child, I'm hoping that he has had one or two children before, so he could give me advice that's meaningful. So I think it's important. It's extremely important in my mind.
You spent a decade at Nike, but it wasn't just any decade. It was really a transformative time when so many brave new things were going on there. Can you give us just a bit of how you stood and what you saw and how decisions were made that were so original and so daring?
Well, a couple of things. One is, yes, I did spend 10 years there professionally, but I had spent 25 years with the brand and the program, even when it was Blue Ribbon Sports, way in advance and way before any of this occurred. The Nike thing occurred. We were importing shoes from Japan. We were partners with Onitsuka Tiger, which still makes shoes, obviously. And during the period of time that I was there, you have to remember, number one is there was no such word as sports marketing, just as there was no such word as cross training. I think people think that cross training has been around forever, but the truth is that Bo Jackson and some other people really elevated it. But people don't remember that Bill Sharman and Bob Cousy and Dave DeBusschere, these are athletes' names you may not remember, all played another professional sport. They were pitchers in Major League Baseball. They were involved in other activities. So the idea of cross training existed, but nobody ever called it out. So during that 10-year period of working professionally and on hands, we had all kinds of things occur. Our first years with Wyden and Kennedy when we were doing advertising, the year that we did Revolution. And I could go on about a story about Revolution. I don't know how interesting it would be, but the reality is we did not have the rights to Revolution, the music, but we played it anyhow and figured that the amount of money we would be fined would not be as much as what we would gain from it. So we made decisions. We kind of made footwear and made apparel and kind of made the rest up. Okay, I was there when the World Cup was in the United States and Brazil was playing at Stanford Stadium, and we hired a bunch of young kids who we were relatively sure would be arrested before the day was over. And we gave them boxes of painter hats. And we were not a sponsor of the World Championships, but everybody who came through every gate got a free painter hat. And it either had Brazil or whoever it was they were playing, but most of them were Brazilian hats. 80,000 people, probably 50,000 of them had painter hats on that said Nike, had the swoosh and had Brazil on it. Totally against, it was counterproductive to what other people were doing. They were spending hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising, and we were hiring kids with boxes to hand out hats. We did not become a sponsor in Barcelona in 1992. And yet in Barcelona, we changed our logo from just a logo to a logo without the name Nike. And everybody thought we were geniuses. And as a result, Ad Age, which is a magazine that I think is still going on, named me the sports marketing guru of the year. And when we had the vote as to whether or not we would eliminate the word Nike and just put the swoosh on it, I voted against it. Of course, until this moment, I never admitted that. So I looked like I was part of that change. So we went from Nike, a very, very well-known brand, to a branded brand that had just a swoosh, and you knew immediately that it was Nike. And we were not sure, even up to that point, that people would know that we were Nike. So we tested it in a market during my years there on a young tennis player who had long hair, who I had mixed emotions about. And here I am 35 years later working with Andre. It was Andre Agassi. He had never won a Grand Slam at that point. We gave him a white baseball cap with a black swoosh on it. We made 50,000 of those hats. We didn't know what would happen. They sold out in hours, and we made 100,000, then 150,000, and then 200,000. And the Nike brand, the Nike swoosh, became the standalone messaging for our company, which is not easy to do. We went from a few billion-dollar company to a $19 billion company. We went from visibility in some parts of the world to visibility globally. We hired more and more people, built a fabulous campus in Oregon, and became the target, where we were the target to start. We were targeting other people to start with, Adidas and Reebok, et cetera, et cetera. And then all of a sudden we became that entity. So I don't know if we invented guerrilla marketing, but guerrilla marketing was associated with us.
Well, and I think the term that some coined was ambush marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And as you described, there were very large competitors and concerns that had paid lots of money for certain marketing space, but everyone would associate the event with you.
Well, the truth is, David, you're exactly right, because the conclusion of Barcelona, we did a study, and I believe that Harvard or one of the Ivy League schools was involved in the study, and they asked X number of thousands of people who were the top 3 sponsors of the games, and Nike came out first, second, or third every single time, and we had nothing to do with the games, nothing. We were just supporting the athletes. But it was interesting, in Atlanta, there is what is called an Olympic ring. When the Olympics are on, there's a ring, a geographic ring that is around the city that's hosting the games. And what ends up happening is only those people that have paid sponsorship dollars, which were in the millions of dollars, could advertise within that Olympic ring. So we went to Atlanta and we did a couple of things. We built a couple of tracks for schools and recreational facilities that did not have them, put Nike swooshes on them, but we were outside the ring. But the thing that we did that was most aggravating was we bought a parking lot that had 3 levels. And on top of it, we erected a 40-foot Nike swoosh, which was outside of the Olympic ring, but could be seen from anywhere in Atlanta. And needless to say, we were visited by a group of people representing the IOC, that thought that we were, a menace to society, that we were not good people and we were the devil. So yeah, ambush marketing is what we did best. And then over a period of time, I was watching the World Series the other day, and here the uniforms all have swooshes on them, which before, when we tried to get the New York Yankees, we couldn't break into baseball. And then we bought New Era, which was a hat company that had all the baseball teams, all the Major League Baseball teams. Well, it was our company, but nobody knew that. It was a fascinating 10 years. I worked with great people. Phil Knight is a visionary. He thinks of things in the short term and long term. Mark Parker was with us then, who later became the CEO. Tom Clark was with us, and he became the president. And little old short fat Steve Miller was in there, and nobody knew exactly what I did, but I always seemed to be in these meetings and always had a point of view, and some of it was embraced and some of it wasn't. But the bottom line is that over the years, I've taken credit for most of it. So it's been a wonderful experience.
Well, you seem like such a nice, sweet guy. And there you were, almost like this could have been a field general doing tactical work. This could be a corporate raider, an investment banker. I'd like to just shift now, before we talk about Agassi Graf, your leadership, your understanding of leadership. How has it evolved? What would you like to tell us about being a leader to help us be better leaders?
That's a great question, David. And it's a bit complicated in this sense that leadership requires, in my mind, from my perspective, the people that you surround yourself with. Do they match up in some way? I always wanted to hire people who were smarter than me. I wanted people around me that wanted my job. I wanted people around me that were aspiring to be better than they could, and the environment was helping them gain some of their, wishes and dreams. Leadership is putting your ego off to the side and becoming a leader of people and placing them in the right positions, giving them responsibility and authority, because we frequently as leaders give people responsibilities, but don't give them the authority to fulfill their responsibility, to find people that are just as enthusiastic or maybe more enthusiastic than you are, and to take a look at the circle of activities that go on, because I have a tendency to think in circles as opposed to linear back and forth. I think of these circles and think of all the obligations and responsibilities that fall in those circles and try to find experts on those issues. And then the homogeneity of that circle puts together a team. And I lead from a position of cooperation, collegiality, et cetera, et cetera. But you also can't be afraid of making the hard decisions. You cannot let difficulty create a problem. I just want to say one other thing that is probably counterintuitive to a lot of people, but to me it seemed logical. Every plan we put together, every strategy we put together irrespective of budget. In other words, I did not allow budget to interfere with our vision and goals. Because if I did that and I didn't have the appropriate budget to meet my needs, I would immediately start thinking smaller. And what I wanted to do was think big and then work towards finding a budget that met our needs as a plan. So I think today, maybe it's not as prevalent as it once was, but I made it a point of always the people with my direct reports, of talking to them every day, of putting my hands on them every day, of hugging them, of asking them about their families, looking way beyond what was occurring in the office and more into them as whole people. They weren't people that just were alive at 9 o'clock in the morning and then they died at 5. They were people that had full lives. There are people that had problems, good things, bad things. And I felt that in order for us to lead effectively and to lead over a long period of time, you had to be engaged with the whole person and not just a portion of the person. So leadership to me is leadership by example, leadership through strategy and discussion, leadership in getting your people vested in the decisions, and as a result, have them be part of that decision-making process. That's what the goal and objective is. And the moment you feel a person has outstripped their skills, in other words, they've become even more skillful, you have to move them on, give them more responsibility, give them more authority. And I can proudly say that I've had, I don't know, I'm going to say hundreds, it could be less, people that have become presidents, vice presidents, directors, management of companies, all over the world, both in the United States and abroad. And it's a source of enormous satisfaction to me.
It's always clear from the first time I talked to you how proud you are and how much reward you get from the accomplishments of the people. What is it that deeply motivates you? You've done so much. You're tireless. Is it the people? Is it the objective? Is it the fixing the puzzle? What motivates you to achieve how much you have?
Well, this is the part that is a little complicated. And David, I know that when we spoke, I talked about this. When I was a 16-year-old teenager, I was incarcerated, and I was not incarcerated in a jail in the strictest sense. It was an Audi home. It was a place for recidivist, young criminals called Montefiore, which is part of Cook County Jail in Chicago. And I saw things and did things that were abhorrent. I saw things that were difficult. And I always knew the difference between right and wrong, but I knew that I had to go home at night. So the environment I lived in dictated my actions. And over a period of time, I was motivated by seeing people get out of those circumstances, seeing people develop additional skills, seeing people do special things. I know this may sound strange to people, but if you go to a concert or if you go to a ballet and you watch people carefully, their skill sets are so extraordinary. Their abilities are so extraordinary that I wanted not only to be successful in the terminology of success, which conjures up money and position, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't want to be good. I wanted to be the best in the world. And even if I couldn't achieve that, I knew it was my goal and the direction I wanted to take. And when I was a little boy riding my bicycle down Michigan Avenue or down Lakeshore Drive and going by these big apartment buildings and watching these doormen have someone enter their building and saying, "Hello, Mr. Smith. How are you, Mr. Smith? What can I do for you, Mr. Smith?" I knew when I was 17, 18 years old that I wanted to be Mr. Smith. I wanted to walk into one of those buildings and have the doorman say to me, "Hello, Mr. Miller. How are you, Mr. Miller? What can I do for you, Mr. Miller?" And then it gravitated to something else. In my 30s, I was I wouldn't know how to explain it except that I was hungry for more. And then money did become an issue and fame became an issue and getting in front of people. And then all of a sudden in my 40s and 50s, I realized I could do it a different way and I could help other people achieve some of those goals. So my vision for what I saw changed and shifted for me. And I began to realize the better they were, the better I would become. So that partnering, that emotion, that collective interest propelled me into a different place. And now that I'm in my 70s, in the last 18 years, my goal and objective is to leave behind some legacy and value of what I said and did. I'm working with Elena Beard, a former WNBA player that is from Shreveport, Louisiana. We just started a foundation called 318, which is geared towards Black young girls in high schools to elevate their educational component so they can deal with an outside world, because the education system in Shreveport may not have matched up with what we need to go to school. Elena tells the story of being a straight A student in high school, going to Duke and being lost. So we have a mentor program. We have a program called Transition Play, which takes the college athlete going through a transition who may become a professional, or a professional athlete who's going through a transition to become something else. Because after the confetti falls and after the confetti is done, you are left with you. And what you did leading up to that is going to determine where you go. And I think we have an obligation to educate, to motivate, to stimulate those people and give them the tools to be the best they can be, and take what they've learned in other areas, become bankers, lawyers, doctors, medical consultants, dentists, whatever it is. I just want them to have a pathway into something better. So everything that I do now is about helping other people. And I'll make one other comment, and then hopefully it accelerates some of this competition. Andre and I started a charter school in the early 90s. We raised $40 million and built a K through 12 charter school. And we had that school for multiple years, almost a decade. And we loved what we had. We loved where we were, but we realized that of the 2,000 kids we had in school, we had 3,000 kids in the waiting list. So instead of looking at it as a success, to us, it was a failure. So what could we do? What we did was create a fund. We raised $1.2 billion from traditional capital, not from philanthropic capital. We made these people that made investments partners of ours. And we now, as of today, have built 125 schools in the United States in some of the worst neighborhoods in America, worst being defined by economics, gang-related issues, et cetera, et cetera. We think we can build 200 by 2025, 2026, and that would have reached the goal that we had. So I am sitting on a board of an entity from Liberia that has built a facility in Liberia and built another facility in Morocco, is about to build a facility in Bangladesh for leadership, how to teach leadership to young people, and at the same time, give them information and insight into soccer. And if they're good enough, maybe they become professional soccer players. If not, they can take on leadership roles, learn things, and become game changers on a continent that needs and has needed over a period of history change, but bring it in a solid, cemented way. And when we started, we were the Andre Agassi Foundation, which was too mystical and it was too vaporous. And then what we did was we said, we're the Andre Agassi Foundation for Education, to give it a pinpoint direction and a pinpoint organization. So yeah, I don't like this stuff. I love this stuff. I love this stuff. It keeps me motivated, stimulated, activated. And besides all of that, in the last 5 years, I've had cancer twice. But I will tell you this, I don't have time to die. I just don't have time for those things. I've got too many things I'm doing, and I can't let it interrupt me. So I'm not being flippant about it, but I dismissed it as a possibility because I still have, excuse my language, I still have shit to do. And that's the way it's gonna be. That's the way it's gonna be. They're gonna have to drag me out of here. So I know that's more than you bargained for, but I thought I'd lay the groundwork.
You always stun me. I'm a professional. I'm pretty good at this, but you're one of the people that really paralyzes me and leaves me speechless. I want to encourage our audience to start putting questions in the chat for Steve while I ask him one or two more things as you load your questions. You're in Las Vegas,
right?
And That's an interesting place at the moment. So I'll just let you wax kind of current and future. What do you see happening in Las Vegas in the world of sports? And what do you just see just writ large, the future of the business of sports? Is it going somewhere you like, that you don't like? What do you portend?
Well, here's the, first of all, my son, Chris, was one of the leading individuals in creating StubHub, a ticket company, which is directly related to sports business. He has since started another company with a friend of his in Europe called Viagogo. And 1 month before the pandemic, they rebought StubHub. They sold it originally for 400 million and they rebought it for 4.1 billion. Now, I tell that story only because secondary ticketing was not an issue 15 years ago or 20 years ago. If it existed in an infinitesimal stage. Sport has changed 15, 20 years ago. If you go to the annals of sports history, they said there'll never be a sporting team in Las Vegas because of the gambling and the possibility of fixing games, et cetera, et cetera. Now the NFL is a partner in gambling. Now touting games is part of the entire league and part of every league. Now, I would say that given social media, and I'm just throwing 2 names out here, not casting dispersions, just throwing 2 names out. One name would be Mickey Mantle, one name would be Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth and Mickey Mantle both had colorful careers for a variety of reasons. I don't know if either one of them could have survived during the social media onslaught. And I'm sure there's hundreds of other athletes that would have been seen differently historically based on social media now becoming such a factor. I think sports is a healthy, meaningful parallel to the way life works, but it also has its failures. It has its failures because of found money. It has its failures because money does lots of things to lots of people. It has its failures because not everybody can become a professional athlete, and professional sports make it feel as if you can. Every kid playing in a park feels that his life may be enhanced and is thinking about sport when they should be thinking about sport in conjunction with education. Athletes who currently are in sport don't prepare for their future as well as they should. Sports Illustrated did an article 10, 12 years ago about the percentage of athletes that have gone bankrupt both in the NFL and in Major League or in the NBA. Hundreds of them, because they didn't have the right guidance, they didn't have the right economic perspective, too much money to their families, too much money to their friends, bad investments. However, having said that, sport is a fabulous outlet. It is something that we have done primordially. When I say that, we ran, we threw, we jumped before there were any games.
Yes.
Before anybody kept scoring anything, right? Because we were given bodies to do certain things. Barefoot running, barefoot sprinting and competing, jumping, throwing, no scores, just I'm better than you. And it's morphed into this issue of how special it can be. But I'm going to use one example, and really it's only one. Charles Barkley does a commercial for Nike and he says, I am not a role model. And everybody freaked out. I shouldn't say everybody, lots of people freaked out. Well, what do you mean you're an athlete, you're a role model? And Charles tried to explain that your mother, your father, your uncle, your brother, someone in your family, a senior member, is a role model. Your teachers are role models, but people didn't want to hear all of that. They just had this storyline that if you're an athlete, you have obligations and responsibilities. And those athletes can barely take care of themselves, let alone take care of everybody else. Right? So it is a time where sport has become gigantic. And by the way, I would say this, if it's not academically an enhancement, or if it's not an addendum to your academic life, let's get rid of it in colleges. Let's get rid of it in high schools. Let's get rid of it. Okay? Let's get rid of books also. Let's get rid of lots of things that may not enhance your life or may not enhance the future. But the truth is, the lessons learned on the field of competition do parallel a lot of life's messages. And it is something that we should embrace. Can the rules change? Look at where the NCAA is going now with the NIL program. Look at what they're doing. Just the other day, they were announcing they're giving more autonomy to universities and schools to run their own programs. Look at what's happening in the leagues. Look at the information highway that is getting to some of the racism and some of the issues that have come up. Wouldn't have happened had it not been for sports. So I think that it's marvelous. And I think that the direction it's going is getting better and better. However, with anything that gets better, there is always a downside. There are always things we can point to that we should have thought about previously, et cetera. The stadiums are getting larger. If the stadiums are getting larger, instead of thinking about the athletes only, let's think about the people that are parking cars. Let's think about the concessions. Let's think about the groundskeeper. Let's think about the janitors. Let's think about a million other jobs that are created because of sport. And for me, I am going to always feel an obligation and a responsibility to sport because it's given me everything, but I don't take it out of perspective. If all you've learned in a sporting environment is how to run and jump, then you haven't learned anything. And the whole person should be educated, not just the physical portion.
We are brothers in arms, sir. I have questions for you from our audience. Connor Reynolds asks, how did you know when it was time to leave one position, and what made you choose the next one?
Connor, that's a question a lot of people ask me. I have to say, number one, just as a preface, when I invested in the Warsaw School of Sports Marketing, there were two schools in the country that were doing sports marketing, one on the East Coast, where they were giving someone an MBA in sports marketing, okay? Now there's hundreds of those schools, including in the Ivy League, recognizing the big business aspect of sport. When I got involved in sport, I was a high school teacher at Bloom High School in Chicago Heights, Illinois. I was the high school track coach, and I thought it was great. We won championships. It was a wonderful experience. I went to Africa because I was the national coach of the year. I went to Africa as a part of this program, this exchange program that the government put together. And all of a sudden I left Chicago and now I'm in Africa. It wasn't like I left Chicago and I went to Milwaukee. It was like I left Chicago and I went to Lagos, Nigeria. All of a sudden I became a citizen of the world. The high school wasn't big enough for me to express my feelings about what needed to be done next or that I could affect. Gravitated to the university. The university, I gravitated to the profession and business of sports. I have never asked about a salary. I have never negotiated a salary. If somebody tells me we want you to do this and we're going to give you X, and I think that what they're asking me to do is something that I want to do, I do it. I once read an article on a United Airlines flight that said, have you been fired by the people who work for you? And what the article said was, about 5 years, they can listen to what you have to say. And after 5 years, it gets a little old. It's the same old stuff. And unless you're changing, you need to change. So each time I've made a change, it's not only because of the elevation, it's been because of influence. I felt that any change I made gave me a platform to espouse the things I believed in, to give me an opportunity to deal with more people. I mean, I just had Bobby Kersey in my office. Bobby Kersey, you may or may not know, is an Olympic coach of resounding, spectacular ability. I had and I'm forgetting his name, I apologize, White, the snowboarder, came into my office to talk about his career. I've had Charles Austin, the Olympic high jump champion. I've had countless number of people come and talk to me. And each time the position I took gave me additional credibility to have those conversations and allowed me to have conversations with people I would not have met otherwise.
Yeah.
So those changes were facilitations for an elevated platform, not an ego elevated platform, just a place where I could connect with more people. And each time it was organic. It just happened. I think I applied for one job in my life. Otherwise, I just kind of seamlessly meandered through a variety of positions. I hope that answers your question.
That's a great answer. Next question is from Arthur Nassenbean. Says, you're clearly a driver of change. How do you come to think disruptively? What is the most important part of innovation? Is it research, instincts, passion, marketing, finance? Arthur would like to know.
It's a great question. It's really interesting. I just think if we're not moving forward, we're going backwards. So at the end of the day, for me, it's always a matter of, can we do this better? And what it is how do you differentiate what you've been doing to what you are doing? So it's not disruptive thinking. It's just thinking about what is and how can it be better? What can I do to make it more interesting? If I'm teaching a class and most of my classroom time is spent articulating and I'm watching people take notes, is there a better way viscerally to get students to engage? Is it through video? Is it through bringing speakers in? Is it through any number of other things? You know, the two greatest changes in sports in the last 20 years, while we all may disagree with this, is really interesting. One is the yellow line in football, which, by the way, is technology that started in World War II. And the other one is, let's take a look at the hold cards in poker. The ability for you to engage as a consumer in seeing what happened or seeing what's about to happen. And you're yelling at your screen, don't go in, don't go all in, don't do this, don't do that. I'd play these cards this way. Those two issues brought people interactivity into the sport. So for me, it's not a matter of change for change's sake. What can we do to enhance the experience? And as a result, it drives you to, and the moment I become complacent and the moment I stop thinking about things, I'll be gone. I'll be dead. I mean, I can't imagine us not. Look, I brought my children home. I know this is a silly analogy, but it's the way my mind works. Okay. I brought my children home from the hospital. My son is 44. My daughter's 48. Neither one of them were in a safety seat. Neither one of them had a safety belt on. They were kids that they put in your backseat of your car or put on your lap, which is now grossly against the law. But they made it home. And ultimately, somebody said there's a better way to do this. There's a better way to do this. So every change that has occurred, or I shouldn't say every, the vast majority of changes have occurred are to make people's lives more interesting, to get them more engaged, and change is good, but change also brings about fear, et cetera, et cetera. Major League Baseball, maybe they'll sue me when I say this, archaic. They trying to move forward, archaic. Why? Because a bunch of old people refuse to think about it in a broader sense. Okay, it makes no sense to me. We bought the X Games, the first year of the X Games. I was head of sports marketing, and I'm happy to say that I was behind the purchase of the X Games, which we bought for like $90,000. Okay. Then it became obvious that we were not going to make product that the X Games was showing, you know, snowboards, et cetera, et cetera. So we got out of it. 3 years later, I tried to rebuy it. The cost was $7 million. So I missed. But what the X Games did, whether you admit it or not, or whether you see it or not, is change the trajectory of the Winter Games, because the Winter Games, which were generally boring, won by people from Nordic countries mostly, all of a sudden added the half pike, all of a sudden added acrobatics, and now all of a sudden the Olympic Games, the Winter Olympic Games are more exciting and more meaningful. Without those changes, it would be just the Winter Games. Let this person from Norway or Scandinavia or someplace else win these events. Now they became more universal. They became different. Change, it's the lifeblood of all of us. It stimulates us, motivates us, activates us. It does all of those things. Long answer to a short question. I apologize.
You've got lots of questions. We've got 11 minutes, but here, Mishkan Omer wants to know, what was the hardest, here's an easy one. What was the hardest decision you made in your professional career?
Oh, God. Okay, well, there are so many. There are so many. You see, the thing about Nike and the thing about the life that I've led, you only read about the great things. You don't read about any of the mistakes. And God knows I've made some mistakes. I mean, I have made horrendous mistakes, signed the wrong person, went to the wrong place. But in addition to that, we were the first American track and field company to get into East Germany. I saw the wall come down. I saw King Constantine thrown out of Greece. I saw General Gowon take over Nigeria when they discovered oil. I saw the breakup of Russia to federated states and ultimately to individual states. I saw all those things, and they all affected sports, and they were all hard. They were hard. I went into communist China, forgot that it was a communist country, thought that I had some deals done, left, and they've evaporated. They evaporated. And you take that personally. So I've made a ton of bad decisions, a ton of them.
I want to get to this question. It says, I assume, this is from an anonymous attendee, I assume that you might be a poker player. Did you use the concepts and tactics of poker in business or life, making decisions and negotiating?
Great question. I'm the worst gambler in the world. I am a risk taker, and that is not good at a poker table. I learned very early on that whatever money I was making, I could easily just give it away. Why go through the game of playing it when I can just walk into a casino and give it to somebody? It's much easier, it's faster, it's quicker, and it's fascinating. I have no poker skills, none. But here's what I do have. I am not afraid. I have no fear when it comes to $1 billion versus $1 million versus $1,000. And Phil Knight once wrote me a note on a napkin. He said, the one thing I admire about you, Steve, is you got some balls. And I thought that was just great. That was great. For a man, it was just great. It was great.
Big question from Vishal Balani. What are some ways that we, in this industry, can positively impact an issue such as climate change?
Yeah, it's a fabulous question. And just using climate change as an example. When all of these stadiums have been built throughout the world, some of them are grass and some of them are artificial turf. The climates are affected because of the way that facilities are built. Climates are affected because of the way concrete is mixed. Climates are affected in a number of ways. Here's how we change. You take people that have big platforms. You take people that are advocates for things. Leonardo DiCaprio is a big advocate for certain things, and DiCaprio's brought attention. Is he the right person? I really don't know. But what we can do as individuals is take our platforms and align our platforms with the hard decisions about how we move forward. Because we don't live in a bunch of different countries. We live in one world. And if we don't take care of that one world, every one of those countries will suffer as a result.
Beautiful answer. I will give the last question to Musi Hiley, who asked this. When working towards long-term goals like the Andre Agassi Foundation, how do you keep everything in focus and still reflect on how much you've done and still need to do?
It's really rather easy in this respect. our country and other countries are never going to fill that hole of desperation, of poverty, of other issues. All you have to do is go to Africa and see some of the camps, or go other places in the Middle East and see camps. Even in the United States, we had a camp for the Japanese during World War II. The bottom line is that what you do is you do what you do best, and you try to go deep. You try to indelibly affect something so that you gain credibility to affect other things. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is to maintain your composure. You're trying to do two things. You're trying to create scalability. You're trying to create sustainability. And we have an obligation to do those things. And we need to, as I said before, use our platform. But I am telling you, we're never going to run out of poverty. We're never going to run out of poor people. We're never going to run out of bad weather. We're never going to run out of tragedy. And I am able to go from place to place because these things are either growing or I'm seeing them diminish through our efforts. That keeps me motivated. That keeps me stimulated. And we do what we can within our capacity. And for me, that is gold. It's gold. It keeps my blood pumping. It makes me excited, because I am not Steve Miller, the head of the Agassi Foundation. I'm Steve Miller, citizen of the earth, and I have responsibilities to it.
Steve Miller, you move me. You do. You move me, man. You teach me. You ennoble me. You make me want to be a better person. I could listen to you all day. We are at the end of our time. I just want to thank you for beginning a journey with me, with NYU, and just for sharing so openly, with such clarity about the things you do, the way you think about the things you do, and for me, just keeping it present, being right here, right now, so vested in this moment. I express my great gratitude and respect for you tonight.
Thank you very much, and thank all of you that listened. I hope a morsel of this is passed on to someone you care about. And then when we're done with this, find someone to hug, find someone to spend time with. You can make a difference. One person can make a difference. Rosa Parks did not wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to change the narrative on racial equality. And yet this young Black woman did something to change the entire narrative. You never know when you're going to be confronted by or have the opportunity to give a teachable moment.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for amazing words. We got to get 2 hours with you next time.
I'm thrilled. I'd love to do it in person.
Well, that is our next step, isn't it? That is, when you're not talking at one of the most important sports marketing conferences, we'll
figure something out. And David, thank you for inviting me, and thank all of you for listening, and wish you nothing but the best. But there's good work going on by a lot of really good people. Don't let the rest of the crap tear you down. We got a chance. A lot of good people in the world.
We'll end on another note of inspiration. Thank you, Steve. There's notes coming in the chat. I don't know if you see them, thanking you. And I hope to talk to you soon, my friend.
Take care of yourself. Thank you very much, David.
Good night, everybody. Thank you all for joining us.